How could there be a baby here, under the blazing sun? I opened a cardboard box in front of the entrance and found a baby inside. The child was limp, with a bright red face. I called an ambulance and the police, but for some reason, the police officer who came to the scene was not aware of the baby's condition. To my surprise, I was arrested by the police officer who arrived at the scene. I was stunned when I heard the reason. The baby that was brought to the hospital was hiding a terrible secret, far beyond my imagination. I am Amaya, a 31-year-old housewife. My husband, Cassius, was a classmate of mine in high school. Although we were aware of each other, we graduated without confessing our feelings. We met again at a reunion and confirmed our feelings for each other. Cassius is a kind and cheerful person who encouraged me and made me feel positive when I was upset over the slightest thing. He seemed like the ideal partner for me. I was pregnant soon after our marriage and was at the peak of my happiness. However, the morning sickness was so severe that I could neither eat nor drink enough water. I couldn't do my housework as much as I wanted to, but Cassius was also busy with his work, so he came home late and worked on his days off. I'm sorry, I'm busy at the moment with a new project. Sorry to make you worry. It's all right. Our baby is growing up fine. I can live with it if it's for the baby's sake. I managed to make it to the last month of pregnancy while going to the hospital and receiving nutritional supplements. However, the breech condition was still not resolved, and the doctor told me it would be better to have a cesarean section. After considering all the risks, I decided to follow the doctor's advice. I felt lonely in a private room at the hospital, so I requested a double room where I met Susan. She was only 20 years old, pregnant, and close to my due date. She was hospitalized because of anemia and swelling. She told me that she plans to get married after the birth. We are different in age, but we hit it off by talking about our favorite TV shows. We became good friends, exchanged our addresses and other information, and promised to visit each other after the birth. However, unlike me, who had relatives visiting me every day, Susan rarely had visitors. I was a little curious about this, but I could not ask her about it because I thought there might be some reason for it. Then one day, my husband, who was supposed to be busy at work, came to visit me. Amaya, how are you feeling? Oh, my dear, come in. But Cassius was surprised to see Susan on the bed next to mine and froze. What's wrong? I thought you were in a private room. I was surprised to see someone in the same room with me, my husband said. But I was in a two-person room, and although I thought it was a strange thing to say, I did not pay attention to it at that time. It's Susan. She's going to have a baby soon. Nice to meet you. Your husband seems very kind. Oh, it's nice to meet you. Thank you for getting along with Amaya. After exchanging greetings with her, I offered my husband some sweets that he had received from a relative, but she told him that she was in between jobs and immediately went back to her office. When I returned to my hospital room after seeing him off, Susan kept asking me how my husband was doing. Why do you care so much about my husband? Well, look, I'm getting married soon, so I just wanted to ask for your information. I see. Well, he seems to be busy with his work, but he is a considerate and kind husband, I replied smilingly. And for some reason, Susan looked dissatisfied and fell silent. 2 days later, when I returned to the hospital room after my examination, my husband was talking to Susan as if he knew her. Then they noticed me and hurriedly stopped talking. Oh, honey, you're here. Yeah, I just came to check on you. You're due for surgery soon, right? Yeah, it's in 3 days. Well, good luck with the baby. I was happy to hear my husband's thoughtful words, but I was concerned about the way Susan was staring at me. For some reason, Susan changed and began to act coldly toward me. Hey, you said you're 31, right? Isn't it too late to have a baby? I feel sorry for your kids if you are an old mom, Susan suddenly said to me. Even though she must have known my age, she continued, Besides, you're an old woman, but you sound so spoiled by your husband. It's disgusting. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? After that, Susan continued to hurl verbal abuse at me at every opportunity, and I couldn't take it. I had to have a cesarean section, but I lost a lot of blood. After seeing the baby for a moment, my consciousness became cloudy, and I had to undergo treatment away from the baby. 10 days later, I was feeling better and was finally able to hold my baby, a small, cute little girl. I asked the nurse about Susan, and she told me that she had given birth one day after me and had already left the hospital with the child. I wanted to remain friends. My relationship with her became somewhat awkward. but I was relieved to hear that Susan had also given birth safely. 3 weeks after the birth, I was finally able to leave the hospital. As my post-operative course had not been good, I named my daughter Aurora. I was filled with happiness at the thought that from now on, I would be able to live with my sweet child. Aurora is a beautiful child with fair skin, fine hair, and slightly brownish eyes. She looked nothing like me or Cassius, but I was sure she must have gotten her genes from one of my ancestors. My milk supply was not good, so I raised her on milk, but she grew up so well, and I couldn't stop. Enjoying the story so far? Show your support by liking and subscribing to our channel. Now, let's dive back into the story. Cassius was also very excited and wanted to see his daughter as soon as he finished work. So he started to return home on time. "Are you done with work?" "Oh, the project is over and I'm on regular duty now, and I miss Aurora so much at work. You're going to be a sweet daddy." But at that time, I never imagined it would come to that. A week later, a big event happened. When I opened the front door to go out for Aurora's 1-month checkup, I found a cardboard box. "What is this? What is this?" I was suspicious, but I opened it with trepidation to see what was inside. And the next moment, to my surprise, I found a baby inside. I don't know how long it had been in there, under the blazing sun in the middle of summer, but the baby was lying there with a bright red face. I immediately called an ambulance and the police. I canceled the 1-month checkup and stayed with Aurora while I attended to the baby. I could not leave the child alone, even though the baby was a stranger to me. Just to be safe, I told my husband about the situation and informed him that I would accompany me to the hospital. "What? A baby was placed in front of our house?" "Yes, under the blazing sun? How old is that baby?" "I don't know for sure, but I don't think it's that different from Aurora. Poor little thing. She must have had a terrible time." "What? The same size as Aurora? Oh my God, anyway, I'm coming with you." The child who was rushed to the hospital was given life-saving treatment, but I could not take my eyes off the baby lying on the bed. I feel like this baby looks like someone else, but I can't remember. But surely somewhere. But then suddenly, a police officer came into the hospital room and told me I was under arrest. When I asked him why, the police seemed to think that the child who'd been brought in was my child. The child was emaciated and had bruises all over her body, so they said they were arresting me. "I have only one daughter," I explained the situation while showing them Aurora, who I was carrying on my chest. But they did not quite believe me. When they said the two babies look alike, so they must be twins. Just then, my husband rushed in, looking panicked, and explained the situation to the police on my behalf. I didn't hear what he was talking about, but the other party nodded and seemed convinced. The police officer then said, "Ma'am, I apologize for earlier. It was a tough time for you." His demeanor changed, and he became kinder and gentler, which I found strange. Half an hour later, when the doctor permitted the baby to leave the hospital, the police asked us to take her home as well. I looked at my husband, not understanding what he meant, and he readily agreed, saying, "Okay." "What do you mean, Amaya?" "I'm sorry, I'll explain when I get home." My husband's eyes were swimming. He did not look at me, and sweat was pouring out of his forehead. There was no doubt that he had something to be guilty about. I couldn't believe my ears when I got home and heard my husband's story. To my surprise, Susan, who was my roommate at the hospital, was my husband's unfaithful partner. She was young and had been doing sugar dating. She met my husband in a life of spending time with older men who would buy the things she wanted and give her money. However, when Susan found out that my husband was well paid, she decided to seduce and marry him at the same time. When Susan became pregnant, she checked out of my hospital and admitted herself there. It was a coincidence that we ended up in the same room, but my encounter with Susan was a setup. "I'm sorry. I was just playing around with Susan. I told her to give it up." When I heard she was having a baby, but she wouldn't have it, my husband got down on his knees and apologized. But I told him to keep talking. I heard that he paid Leah $30,000 in alimony and told her to leave him at the hospital. Now I know the reason for Elle's sudden change. I guess she thought my husband was going to leave me and marry her younger self. But when that didn't work out the way she wanted, she took it out on me. When her husband heard about the baby in the cardboard box from me that morning, he suspected it was Susan's. I hurriedly called, and she told me it has become too difficult to raise the child, so I decided to give it to you. I named the child Celine, so please take care of her. I was astonished by this story that came out of the blue. I was disgusted with her for leaving the child on our doorstep, but I was disgusted with my husband's human nature for getting his affair partner pregnant and then trying to settle it with a payout. After the last month of pregnancy, I wondered at this point if she was hiding an even more unbelievable fact. If this idea is true, then what a horrible woman Susan is. But it is her husband who has made her that way. I looked at my husband, who was on his knees trembling with anger that was welling up inside me. You know you wouldn't want to raise Susan's child either, would you? Do you want me to put her in an institution? I don't even recognize her, so I don't even... What didn't you tell the truth to the police? That won't matter. I regretted so much that I had married such a shallow and stupid man, but there was no taking back what I had. I had to think about what I was going to do. However, at this time, I had already made up my mind. After comparing Aurora and Minerva in my heart, I decided to talk to Susan to get closure and called her. I knew her phone number because we had exchanged information when we became friends in the hospital room. Susan, I'm leaving my husband. Then can I marry him? You and Cassius will have to talk about it and decide. I'm coming over there right now. I asked my parents, who lived nearby, to come over immediately and watch the two babies. My parents wondered why there was another baby with Aurora, but when they saw the look of impatience on my face, they cooperated without asking any questions. After about 30 minutes, Susan arrived, and my husband, her, and I had a face-to-face talk. My husband's face was tense, and his face was tense, while Susan's face was full of smile, and I must have looked like an ogre. So why did you decide to replace the baby, Elle? My husband looked shocked at my words, his eyes wide open like saucers, and his mouth moving like a goldfish. Amaya, what are you talking about? Susan grinned at my husband, who was intensely confused by the fact that he had just been informed of this for the first time. How did you know? No, yes, Aurora was not my child, but Susan's child. The Celine in the cardboard box was the child I had given birth to. I had no idea what was going on, and I loved Aurora as my child. But to be honest, I also felt a sense of discomfort after the birth. In a moment of surprise, I saw the child I had given birth to, but she had dark hair. Aurora, however, had fine hair with a slight brownish tinge. I thought it was my illusion, but I could not shake off the nostalgia I felt when I first saw Celine. I was very much like Celine with her thick dark hair, slightly dark skin, and big tail-like eyes. Nothing things I would, and this is the child I gave birth to. I have no doubt. When I held my Celine, I was sure of it, but I could not understand why Susan had switched the child. It's because I can't help what I've been exposed to. Susan's story was selfish and appalling. Susan had planned to marry Cassius, but at the hospital he told her to leave him and gave her $30,000 as a parting gift. Compared to her unhappy self, she felt jealous of me, who was loved by her husband and relatives and gave birth to a blessed child. She also said that she could not stand the unfairness of comparing my child, who would be born without any inconvenience, with her child, who would have no father and would have a difficult life ahead of him. She was using the cutoff money she received. She recruited the nurse into her ranks and replaced the baby. She thought she had succeeded because I had been in a coma since birth. However, not only did Susan not find other people's children cute, but my daughter Minerva cried so much at night that she was sick of raising her, so she returned her in a cardboard box. I was stunned by this story. I was speechless with amazement that someone could do such a reprehensible thing, to treat our precious children as if they were objects. At that moment, Cassius, who had been listening to our conversation with his eyes black and white, finally opened his mouth. I had no idea Susan is such a horrible woman, Amaya, please. You're the only one I love. Don't tell me you're leaving me. My husband seemed to care more about himself than the fact that their child had been replaced. He got down on his knees to ask me not to leave him because he had no intention of marrying Susan. Seeing this, Susan's eyes bled, and she turned the tables on him. What? That's not what I'm talking about. Cassius is going to marry me, right? I never once said I was going to marry you. I told you I didn't want a baby with you, but you gave birth to it on your own. Enough. You are both awful. It's truly appalling that you have no regard for the children who have suffered so terribly. So, yes, let's give Aurora to Susan and raise our Celine together. He is the worst kind of man in every way, and he doesn't even realize that he is the husband who is the source of all this. Then Susan grabbed Cassius. "I'll never let you go. I hate this woman." As I watched the two of them grabbing each other and cursing at each other in an ugly way, I felt my feelings completely cool down. "Okay, I can't stand your face. It's almost time for milk, and you can continue this at the police station." At the mention of the police, the two of them, pale as a sheet, began to beg for forgiveness. "Police, I'm sorry, I'll apologize. Please don't do it. Amaya, let's talk about it. I keep apologizing, don't I? I'll never cheat on you again." "It's too late. I never want to see your face again or go and reflect on how you have caused the children suffering." Then the police arrived. The parents who were listening to the conversation in the next room had reported the incident. Susan was arrested and my husband was taken away for questioning. I was left with my two children and returned to my parents' home. Susan and the nurse who helped her were later caught and convicted by the police and sent to prison. I consulted a lawyer and demanded $20,000 in alimony and $50,000 in child support from Susan. I divorced my husband and decided to raise both Aurora and Minerva as my children. I demanded $30,000 in alimony and $200,000 in child support for the two children from my husband. My husband was afraid of being sued by me, so he used all of his savings to pay the bills and borrowed from a shady consumer finance company to cover the shortfall. As a result, I heard that he is living a shabby life in a shabby apartment with huge debt. The process of making both children my children was complicated, but it went without a hitch, and now they are both growing up together. Both Aurora and Minerva are my precious children. My parents understand my feelings and love them both equally, so I started looking for a job to work when they turned 1. It may be hard work, but I will do my best for the sake of my lovely children. Thanks for watching! How did you find the story? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more awesome stories like this. Your feedback and support mean a lot.